Welcome to the WinEH podcast. This show is focused on empowering ranchers. Whether you're a seasoned rancher or just getting started, we'll guide you on how to use the infinite banking concept as an alternative way to finance your operations. It's a better way to think about money. Join us as we discuss planning for the future, attracting the next generation, and the art of keeping more money within the family. Here's your hosts, Winnie and Lacy.
Welcome. We are just so glad to be here today. We're glad you're here listening on the other end. And we're going to continue doing what we did from our last session that we were able to sit down, Lacy. And what did we get up to? What are we starting out on?
Yeah, so we started going through Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, because without this book, we wouldn't be here. This is where it all started. And so we just felt the need to dive into the book and give you guys kind of insight to what is actually in this book.
And so what we're doing today, we're reading from the 5th edition. A lot of times, I think what's available online is sometimes the 6th edition, but we're working from the 5th. And right now we're on page 4. And one of the things that I was really calling to me to talk about today is, about the second paragraph in, he just says, hopefully becoming your own banker will give you a new perspective on the idea of retirement. I prefer to use the words passive income is what Nelson would always say. And untraining yourself from what we have all been trained to talk about, which is retirement. And if we actually think back on, where does the concept of even retirement come from? It actually comes from Germany, all the way from Germany during a time where there was a lot of students that came out of school, but there wasn't a lot of jobs for them because many people in their, 60s and 70s were holding all these positions in a company. And so this country had to actually come up with a way of helping to move these older folks out of the workforce so that the students, all these students that had no jobs, had a place to go to earn money. And that's where the concept was born. And then, I think a lot of people really like that concept. It's like, the idea of not having to work anymore. It's an idea. You never know what happens with an idea. It just can grow and grow. And I think ideas are great once they're implemented and they do serve a purpose and a time. And yet at the same time, in terms of like living a meaningful life, we never really truly do stop working in a way, right? Like we might stop working in a job, but our purpose, our meaning for living never really dies out. For Nelson, just to give you some perspective for him, sharing the infinite banking process, he never stopped. I mean, he passed away just shortly after he turned 88. And right up until his last breath, he was sharing the infinite banking concept. This was a passion for him. And he never quit. He never stopped working. But what he did emphasize was the need to create income and still have income even well after you're done working, and which we should focus on all the time. Anyways, right? Our need for finance is greater than our need for death benefit. So you'll quite often hear us use passive income, and it is actually as a replacement to retirement.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, the story about Germany and how an idea just gets stuck with us. And it reminds me of my great uncle Paul, who was an accountant. He was in the Navy and he was an accountant, and he worked until his eyesight didn't allow him to work anymore. And it was into his 80s because he loved what he did. And that's always just like inspired me because he didn't have his mind set on, I'm working till this age and then I'm retiring and whatever maybe in those years. He just kept doing what he was doing because he loved it so much until he physically could not do it anymore because of his eyesight. And then his daughter and his granddaughter took over the business and were working with him for years, but he stayed active in it. And I think it kept that purpose alive for him, but he loved what he did. So he didn't see it as work.
Mm-hmm. And, may we all be blessed with knowing and being able to do what we love. I mean, not everyone feels this way, but I do hope that we all end up being in a position where we can find that thing, that it doesn't even feel like work. It just feels like a joy to do it all the time, right? So I wish that for all of us. The other thing that I really wanted to comment is really taking a moment to really define passive income, which Nelson did here. He just, he just said, passive income is money coming in that you can count on and you don't do anything to earn it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Here, that's very different than residual income. Residual income is there's a few industries that allow for residual income that have nothing to do with multi-level marketing or direct marketing, such as our industry. In the life insurance industry, we do have an opportunity to earn residual income for a certain period of time, but it is not passive income. It's very different. And it's the same thing when if a person is in a multi-level marketing or a direct marketing kind of company, it just means that the people that are, in your organization, but joined in after you, but are within your little pod, right? You get to earn extra residual income from the efforts that they do, right? And that's actually really no different than most organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think about it, but that residual income doesn't come in if there is no people supporting that, right? Passive income comes in whether it's derived by other people's efforts or not. That's a major, major difference. And something that's very interesting is that when you really take a look at the breakdown of when you're a client and you have a dividend participating whole life insurance contract, depending on how you use it throughout your entire life, it will actually become potentially a passive income stream, so to speak. And it's unintended. It's an unintentional result that kind of happens due to the way the contract is structured.
Right. And Nelson says that in that same paragraph, he goes on to say, if you study the illustrations in this book, you will see that very high premium dividend paying whole life insurance is the ultimate vehicle to produce such income. And a question or comments that we get often are people who are seeing the premium as an expense when, sometimes when they first come to us, instead of a tool that helps to produce this passive income in those later years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it really is a paradigm shift. And he goes on to say, IBC is a major paradigm shift for most folks because we have an idea that is given to us. Insurance is an expense. And so this is a major paradigm shift to see the potential in this particular style of insurance policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just in the first, page 3 and page 4, I mean, it's a general summation of be open. This is going to it's just going to change the way you perceive things. This is not just about, it's about owning your own debt. It's about the fact that this can also be something that is in the long term, in the latter part of your years, it can also serve you greatly. He always talked about long range thinking. And so just even within these first 2 pages, it extends your thinking all the way out until your retirement stages. Okay. So I guess there's the acknowledgments that he goes through. And then, of course, the table of contents, which is quite interesting to also preview as well. I guess we'll dive right into, I would say just even the first paragraph, I would have a bit to say about that. So maybe, Lacy, you can do a little quick summary of what it says.
Yeah. So part 1, becoming your own banker. Someone made the comment, if some authoritative power distributed all the money in the world equally among all of the people in the world, within 10 years' time, 97% of all of the money would be under the control of 3% of the people. So that's a big sentence. And let's unpack it. What does it mean?
Well, I would say like it kind of, when I first read this, a few different concepts sort of came to mind. Is this valid? Is this true in terms of like how human beings are, in terms of being able to accomplish something, do something? I certainly think that there's been a lot of written stories and articles about like the 1%, the wealthier, a slim bunch, right? I think about the 80-20 Pareto rule. 20% of what you do creates 80% of your results, kind of thing. Like there's a whole bunch of things that really come to mind when I really read this. I would say that based on my own personal observations and my personal insights when I observe the world, over like since I was like a teenager, right? Like I didn't really think about the world in general until I was like a teenager, right? And I would say that not everyone, if we're saying that, is it possible for everyone to be wealthy, like stinking rich, wealthy? And I would say that no, because the reason why that is, and why I think very few people actually can accomplish things like the really wealthy can do, is because they are focused and disciplined about it. And they have systems and habits in place that support the result of being wealthy. And the people that don't and aren't, what is their habits and what is the systems that they have in place to support being wealthy, right? And again, it comes right back down to deciding, and the whole act of being able to decide starts with the function of thinking. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, that's good. I was just reading a little further on, and he changed the numbers a little bit, but then he says, maybe the answer lies in the fact that most people know next to nothing about the banking process and its importance. I think this too, because banking has become just like second nature to us. We're just
unconscious.
Yeah, it's an unconscious thing that we do and that we have in our brains. And so they know next to nothing about the business of banking and the importance of it to their lives and their well-being. And then he goes on to say, banking is actually the most important business in the world, because without it, all business comes to a screeching halt.
Very true. It's like the Matrix movie. That is our the bank is like basically the veins of which money flows throughout the world.
Yeah, and he goes on and he relates it to the flow of water in the world, and if the flow of water were to stop. And so I think like we really just have to stop and ask ourselves, one, like, what do we know about the banking process? How important do we feel that it is to us, or do we know how important that he's saying it is? And then what can we do? When you know better, you do better. So what can we do when we find out about this book and about this concept? What can we do to change the future and change what happens in our own flow of money to make it better for us?
Yeah, and I think that quite often, like when I'm going through this particular section here, change for the sake of change means absolutely nothing. People are more, I believe, I've always been more motivated to change when there's like a problem. When I know there's a problem with continuing to do something that we're doing. So this is also why not everyone will do infinite banking, because they may not relate to the problem.
Yeah,
or see the problem.
Yeah, it's that saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right.
And so we have to see that it's broken in order to be motivated to fix it.
Like, as you know, Lacy, I had, and I don't do this for everyone, so I will qualify this. I do not do this all the time. It just happened to be this way. I ended up having like a soup cooking session because it was long enough to cook a really good soup or a brisket, maybe.
A brisket, yes.
Yeah, brisket session, 5.5 hours with a couple. And again, it's not typical. I don't I don't like to do that typically. That's a lot of time. But it was an interesting conversation because how they came to find out about infinite banking, it's not like just yesterday. This was simmering and cooking for them for almost 2 years when they first started hearing about it. Just like little tidbit here and there. It started off with, I think, hearing a podcast with Mary Jo way back when he was kind of almost struggling to figure out, specifically when. And then I think having to have dealt with the banks for quite a long time and run fairly good operation and be up to date with all of his administration, his filings and everything. But every single year you got to go back and qualify, or you have to go back and qualify and talk to the bank when you want to acquire some more land. And when you're in a place where you're ready to acquire and you go to your banker and the banker says no, because it just like the money fell, but you have all the equity in the world, but where the money shows in a particular space didn't fit just quite right. And he was denied the financing for being able to acquire the land that he really wanted. But knowing that he had all the equity in the world to back the financing of it. So that was the tipping point at which he said, that's it. I want none of my debt to be owned by any of the bank. How quickly can I do this?
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, so it's kind of a funny thing, but it's like when something is like an absolute problem, when it finally hits a point where it becomes so painful when you miss an opportunity to expand your business when you want, without having to feel like you have to beg someone to get it. Mm-hmm. This is where
it's so disempowering when they tell us no, right? When we know that, one, we can do it, and we know that it's going to better our lives and our operation and our family, and then you're told no. It's disempowering. It's maddening.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also maddening to when you get to a place where your operations has like 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces of loans or lines of credit with a bank. All of a sudden it's a really fine line of like feeling like you have a farm or a ranch to operate, but also feeling like you're not just working to pay the lenders. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. And I think like this has been, this week in particular, for some reason, it's been on my mind. There are lending institutions in our faces everywhere we go. I got some junk mail. You're pre-approved for $10,000. And it had a QR code, and it says, scan this code to accept your offer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, some people, maybe they would be in the position where they felt like that was enticing to them, and they would scan that QR code I'm like, well, what are the terms and conditions? That's the first thing that went through my mind. Like, okay, I'm going to shred this. And then I'm going to sit here and wonder, like, for the poor soul who actually scans the QR code, what are they getting into? And then the Money Mart. When I was in town this week, I noticed the Money Mart was on the corner, and it's like, come in, we'll give you money today. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like all of these people, you're becoming a slave every time. And maybe sometimes it's needed, or they're in a position where things are super, super tight. But it kind of like broke my heart when I saw the Money Mart and like this QR code thing, because some people are in a position where they would take those offers, one, without fully knowing what they are, and then be a slave to that lender. So that's really been in my face this week for some reason. I don't know why. It just had me thinking about, like, we need to be in control.
Right. Well, Lacy, aren't you glad we're doing what we're doing? Well, yes. I honestly, I do feel like, thank you, Nelson. And also, like, I would say, Nelson, if he was here, he'd probably be also say, well, thank God. Thank God too, right? And not to make this any like religious or anything by any stretch of imagination, but it's just when you read Nelson's book you will also notice that he's unapologetically a Christian, unapologetically. And I hope that whether you are a Christian or not, that you don't discount what this book has to say merely because you have or you don't have a relationship or don't want to hear anything about it. I really do hope, though, if you are at least one bit have a desire to want to have a better quality of life, this book is going to contribute to it.
Yeah.
100%. So I guess with that being said too, like coming, because we're talking about like, the flow of cash, questioning where our cash flow comes in and comes out of, the warehouse that it comes in and comes out of, and does it actually serve you? Right. So you just mentioned a moment ago, you get a piece of mail or you go to you go to Money Mart. Like these are things that like people don't really stop to question. Where are you putting the flow of your cash, or where are you wanting the flow of your cash come from? And what happens when you run your cash through that particular platform? What happens to you? And you do it over and over again. Banking never stops. I very rarely go to an actual physical location for a bank, but when I did, it used to be there's a lineup for business owners and a lineup for seniors.
Yeah.
Banking never stops, even for the seniors who have well stopped working. So the flow of cash is a lifelong relationship. And so one of the things that I really realized much later in my time of sharing IBC is that every single decision that we make with money contributes to an end result of how much money we have at the end of our life, nearing the end of our life. So those of us who question and or have the ability to think long term of like, man, I want to make sure I have enough money, when I'm done actively working.
Well, yeah, because that conversation came up this week too with someone where it's like, man, we're afraid we don't have enough money saved up. And I look at my parents and I see how active they want to be in their grandparents' lives. And I live 2,000 miles from them. And so for them, the freedom to travel here when they want, anytime they want, and have that flow of cash in order to do that. And that's something like, well, I want to be able to do that. I want to set myself up and teach my kids to set themselves up so that you have that freedom, and then share it with our people too. Like share this, like we want this for you. We want you to have a pool of money that does not limit you. And I had that conversation with the client too, where she's like, I don't want to live on a very limited budget just so that my kids can take over the ranch. I want us all to live abundantly. And if they want to take over, then we still get to live our lives the way we want to live them, not be a slave to a lack of a pool of cash.
And so can you, just for a quick moment, so Nelson shares his first Bible verse at the bottom of page 11, I believe. And so are you comfortable to, for those of us who don't read the Bible, what that means?
Oh, yeah.
What it means?
So this is a very popular Bible verse, Jeremiah 29:11, and it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And it says that, it references that many times throughout Scripture about God has good for us. Yes, there are going to be challenges because, we could get into it. The fall, Adam and Eve, they ate the fruit from the tree they weren't supposed to. And so that created the fall. And then now, there's weeds that we have to contend with on the farm. If you want to grow your crop, now you're dealing with weeds because of the fall. But even though all of that, he has plans to prosper us and not harm us. But I also believe that we have to hold up our end of the deal too. We can't just live willy-nilly and not be responsible and expect God to prosper us and give us abundance. We have to do our part too.
Yeah. And so as it relates to this very first page, in your opinion, I know that you never had an actual conversation with Nelson, but in your opinion, when you read this verse, how do you think it relates to the first page?
I think that Nelson also, I think maybe he used this scripture because he also wants good for the people that are reading the book. And that's why he started sharing this concept that he conceived and the message to people, because he also wanted to give people hope and give people a future where they weren't feeling hopeless in their finances, basically. And so that's how I interpret it. Yeah. Declares plans to prosper you and not harm you. And Nelson believes that this concept, it can be integral in that hope and prosperity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would tend to agree. So very biasly, again, because I live this financial lifestyle, I live the IBC financial lifestyle. And as we get into more of this book and we talk about like the flow, like just where is your money flowing in and out of you? And is it benefiting you or is it not benefiting you? And it's like over and over again. Again, banking is a process. There's going to be many financial transactions that we have. Just think about on daily average, if we actually took an average of how many times we pay for something or something that's paid silently through pre-authorized payments. How many transactions a day? How many transactions a month? How many transactions a year is money flowing in and out of our hands? And if it isn't flowing through our own bank, so to speak, then how is that actually prospering you? Really, the page 11 is really a really great page just to talking about the flow of money. And he really begins talking about the problem.
Right. Yeah. So I encourage our listeners, and if you have this book, I encourage you just to open your imagination to, okay, what is the flow of money and how does it relate to me? Because I mean, each one of us, we're just one tiny piece in this whole big world, right? But we all make up this whole world. And so how does the flow of money, how does it work and how does it pertain to us and what can we do to help prosper our own flow of money? So opening up that imagination.
Right. And control our own flow of money instead of allowing it to flow for us. Okay. So I think there is a lot of really good, I highlighted the crap out of my first page here. There's even in this very page 11, lots of good things. But I think in order for you to really truly know, we're not going to read it out loud. So Lacy, what are we going to share with these people?
Okay. So you've heard us ramble and we are so passionate about this. You need the book. So head over to our website because I have mine, you see, it's all bookmarked up. ranchyourway.com and get your copy of this book and start the learning process because that's where your journey starts is the book. You can listen to all of our podcasts, but I guarantee you're going to want to come back to the book. Farming Without the Bank, also an integral part. You can get them as a bundle on our website. Without Nelson's book, Mary Jo's Farming Without the Bank book wouldn't have been written, and then it wouldn't have been revised for Canadians as well with Winnie. So thank you for listening. If you can head over to Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts and shoot us a review, we would very much appreciate that. Share this episode with someone that you know and love, and we will see you in the next episode.
So glad you leaned in with us on the WinEH podcast. We truly hope you're feeling more informed and empowered to take another step towards optimizing your financial life. Right now, make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep growing and learning with us. Until next time, we wish you prosperity in every area of your life.